She waited 3 days at the station until the child in boots said, "Will you marry my daddy instead?" Ashford, Wyoming Territory, spring of 1874. The wind spilled down from the naked hills, rattling the signs nailed to the lone depot of Ashford's rail line. The station was little more than a weather-beaten shack, one bench too short to stretch out on, a stove so rusted it gave no warmth. Inside, Clara Wynne clutched a folded letter, the kind of paper that once carried hope like a sealed promise. "You're saying," she began, her voice tight, "there's no Elias Mercer in this town?" The station master, a gray-bearded man who looked older than the wood walls themselves, rubbed his jaw. "Been keeping this stop for 30 years. Never heard that name. Asked around too. No Mercers here, never were." Clara held the envelope up again, pointing at the writing. Elias Mercer, Ashford, Wyoming Territory. Stamped by an official agency seal. It looked legitimate. It had felt genuine. And now it dissolved in her hands like smoke. "I got a letter," she insisted. "He said he owned a ranch near the foothills." The old man shook his head. "News to me. Sure it was Ashford you were bound for." Her throat ached as she whispered. It said Ashford clear as day. "You'd best wait inside," the station master offered gently. "Nights turn cruel out here." But Clara stepped out anyway and sank onto the bench, the paper still crumpled in her fist. That was day one. Day two, she ate the last of the stale bread she'd carried in her carpet bag, then used the bag as her pillow. Folks in town passed with sidelong looks. Some pressed biscuits into her hand. Most just whispered. By the well, she overheard them. Another one, a woman murmured. "Third girl this year. Poor thing still believes he's coming." Clara forced down her crust of bread, too proud to let her eyes brim. By the third morning, the station master himself brought her a tin of weak tea. "No word?" she asked, desperate for something, anything. He shook his head, starting to think that man never lived at all. "There's been boys round here playing games with letters. Wouldn't surprise me none." Clara's fingers tightened around the cup. "Happened last fall, twice," the old man added. "Them girls caught the next eastbound. Best thing they could have done." Clara lifted her gaze to the distant hills, the very ones she had once believed carried her future. She rose, brushed the dust from her skirt. "When's the next train east?" "Day after tomorrow." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll wait a little longer. Just not for Elias." "You don't deserve this," the station master told her. Clara gave a weary smile. Most people don't deserve what they end up with. That afternoon, Clara leaned against the split-rail fence, staring at nothing in particular, when a sudden tug at her skirt startled her. She looked down and found a little girl, no more than 5, her braids tangled with dust, her boots far too large for her tiny frame, and eyes sharp as flint. "Are you the lady who got left behind?" the child asked plainly. Clara blinked. "Excuse me." "You got the bag and the sad face," the girl replied matter-of-factly. "That's what Miss Helen told me." For the first time in days, Clara almost laughed. "Well, yes, but I think I'm finished being that lady." The girl tilted her head. "Then maybe you can marry my daddy instead?" Clara froze. I beg your pardon?" "He lives out that way," the child said, pointing toward the hills. "He says he doesn't need a wife, but maybe he just ain't been asked right." Before Clara could speak, the girl grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "Come on. I can't walk back alone. You best come with me." Clara stammered. "And who exactly is your father?" "Silas Calloway," the girl answered proudly. "He don't smile much, but he's good. You'll see." Clara hesitated, glancing back toward the empty station and the tracks that promised nothing. Then she looked at the child's hand, warm and certain in her own. After 3 days of loneliness and broken promises, that small hand was the first real comfort she'd felt. So she let the girl lead her. By sundown, they reached a modest ranch tucked against the foothills, a weathered house with peeling paint, a barn leaning on tired beams, and 2 horses watching from the corral. A man stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands against his trousers. Broad-shouldered, dark-eyed, his face looked carved from stone. The little girl ran ahead. "Daddy, I brought somebody." His eyes fixed on Clara, then shifted back to his daughter. His voice came flat, measured. "I didn't send for a wife." Clara lifted her chin, clutching her carpet bag close. Then perhaps someone else sent me. For her. She glanced toward the child, and for just a moment, something in Silas Calloway's expression cracked. Not a smile, but enough to hint that behind the stone there was still a man learning how to feel. Clara had not planned to step across the threshold of Silas Calloway's house. Yet somehow, by nightfall, she was sitting at his rough-hewn kitchen table. The place smelled of pine smoke and saddle leather, its walls bare except for a rifle hung above the hearth. The little girl, Maisie, chattered as she set out 2 tin cups and a mismatched plate. "Daddy makes beans and biscuits most nights, but I like it when somebody else cooks." "Can you cook?" Clara smiled faintly. "I can manage." Silas's voice cut across the room. "She won't be staying." Maisie wrinkled her nose. "You always say that. Then you don't make her leave right away." "I mean it this time," he replied, though his eyes never lifted from the table he was sanding. Clara folded her hands in her lap. "I don't intend to be a burden. I can work for my supper, and I'll leave once the next train east comes through." Maisie's face fell. "That's too soon." The silence stretched until Silas finally muttered, "One night." "That's all." Clara nodded. "One night then." After supper, she helped Maisie into her small bed tucked beneath a patched quilt. But before long, the girl's breathing grew ragged, her skin hot beneath Clara's palm. "Mr. Calloway," she called urgently. "Your daughter, she's fevered." In an instant, Silas was at the bedside, his hand brushing Maisie's damp brow. His jaw tightened. "It comes on fast. Been happening since winter. She needs cool cloths and broth to keep her strength," Clara said, already fetching water from the basin. "You talk like a nurse," he said. "My mother taught me. She doctored half our town with nothing but rags and herbs." Clara pressed the wet cloth gently against Maisie's face. "I won't let her burn up." Through the long night, Clara worked tirelessly, changing compresses, coaxing spoonfuls of broth past Maisie's lips, murmuring soft words until the child's breathing steadied. At dawn, exhausted, she slumped against the chair. Maisie stirred, her small hand clutching Clara's fingers. "You stayed," the girl whispered weakly. Clara smiled through her weariness. "Of course I did." When she looked up, she found Silas watching her silently from the doorway. His hard features softened in a way that startled her. He didn't speak, but his eyes said what his lips would not: gratitude, and perhaps the faintest spark of trust. The morning after Maisie's fever broke, Clara set aside her carpetbag, but not her resolve. She told herself it was only until the next train passed, but already her hands found work to do. She swept the kitchen floor, patched a torn shirt she found draped over a chair, and even scolded the chickens out back when they scattered feed all over the yard. Maisie followed close behind, skipping along in her 2 big boots. "You make things look different," the girl announced. "Not like when Daddy does it." Clara laughed softly. "Different isn't always better, Maisie." "Feels better to me," the child insisted. Silas, overhearing, gave a low grunt from where he mended a bridle. "She won't be here long enough to change anything." Clara straightened, brushing the dust from her skirts. "Then you won't mind if I keep myself useful while I'm here." His dark eyes flickered to hers, but he said nothing. That evening, Clara cooked supper, simple stew with bread browned at the edges. Maisie devoured 2 bowls before nodding off at the table. Silas watched the scene with a mixture of unease and something else he kept hidden behind silence. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly, once Maisie was carried to bed. "I know," Clara replied, her voice calm. "But I wanted to." His jaw worked, as though words might come, but he chose to swallow them instead. The silence stretched, filled only by the crackle of firewood. Later, alone in the small spare room, Clara stared at the ceiling beams. She told herself again that she was only passing through. But the truth was harder to ignore. In this weathered house, with this solemn man and his daughter, she felt more belonging than she had in years. And that terrified her more than being left behind at the station ever had. The days slipped into a rhythm Clara hadn't expected. She rose with the sun, fetched water, tended to Maisie, and found small ways to ease the weight of ranch life. But with every task, Silas's silence pressed against her like a wall. One afternoon, She carried a bucket of feed toward the barn. Silas intercepted her, his expression stern. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," Clara answered, brushing past him. "But someone must." His brow furrowed. "This is my land. My work. I didn't ask you to step in." Clara turned, meeting his gaze squarely. "And I didn't ask to be left stranded on a train platform. Yet here I am, making myself useful." The air between them tightened, heavy with unspoken truths. Silas's jaw tensed, but he said nothing more, retreating to his tools. That evening, Clara found Maisie perched on the fence, watching the horizon. "Your daddy doesn't like me meddling," Clara murmured. Maisie swung her boots idly. "He don't like anybody meddling. But he watches you different. Like he's mad, but also not." Clara smiled faintly. "That's a peculiar way to put it." Maisie shrugged. "Daddy's peculiar." Later, when a storm rolled in, Clara hurried to bring in the laundry. The wind whipped her dress as she gathered the sheets, struggling against the gusts. Silas appeared suddenly, taking half the load without a word. Their hands brushed in the exchange, and both froze. For a heartbeat, the storm raged around them, yet all Clara felt was the warmth of his hand against hers. He pulled back quickly, his voice gruff. "You should stay inside when it blows like this." Clara held his gaze. "And leave you to fight it alone?" "I don't think so." For the first time, his lips twitched as though a smile threatened to break through. But he turned away before it could. Clara stood in the doorway that night, listening to the storm batter the roof, and admitted to herself what she hadn't dared before. Beneath his stone face, Silas Calloway stirred something in her heart she had long thought lost. The storm passed, leaving the land washed clean, but unease lingered in the air. Clara sensed it in Silas, his eyes scanning the ridgeline, his shoulders always taut as if waiting for something to break. That evening, while Clara chopped vegetables at the table, Silas strode in, his boots heavy on the floorboards. "Some riders passed near the creek," he said. "Men I'd rather not see circling so close." Clara looked up sharply. "Do they mean you harm?" His jaw tightened. "They've caused it before." He glanced toward Maisie, who sat humming softly with her doll. "I won't let them near her." Later, as dusk swallowed the valley, the sound of hooves echoed in the distance. Silas fetched his rifle from above the hearth, the motion smooth, practiced. Clara felt her pulse quicken. "Stay inside," he told her. But Clara stepped closer, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "If danger comes, you'll need more than one set of eyes." He gave her a long look, equal parts exasperation and respect. "You've got steel, I'll grant you that." The riders never reached the house that night. Their shouts faded into the hills, leaving only silence and the crackle of the fire. Yet Clara saw the way Silas lingered by the door long after, gun still in hand. When Maisie was tucked safely in bed, Clara approached him. "You carry this burden alone, don't you?" His eyes darkened. "It's safer that way." "For whom?" she asked softly. The question hung between them, unanswered. But in that moment, Clara realized the walls he had built weren't just for his own protection. They were for Maisie's, and maybe even for hers now too. The days after the riders passed brought an uneasy calm. Silas worked harder than ever, his silence a shield. Clara moved through the house with quiet determination, though her thoughts often drifted to the look in his eyes that night. How fear and resolve had battled inside him. One afternoon, Clara found Maisie in the yard, struggling to braid a rope like she'd seen her father do. Clara knelt beside her, showing her how to weave the strands. Maisie's laughter rang out, bright against the wide sky. Silas appeared in the doorway, watching them. Something softened in his expression, though he quickly masked it when Clara noticed. That evening, Clara carried supper to the table. Silas hesitated, then finally spoke. "You've done more here in a week than I managed in months." Clara tilted her head. "Are you saying thank you, Mr. Calloway?" His lips curved slightly, the ghost of a smile. "Maybe I am." They ate in silence, but it was a gentler silence than before. When Maisie excused herself, claiming sleep tugged at her eyes, Clara and Silas were left alone by the fire. Clara toyed with the hem of her sleeve. "You keep everyone at arm's length." "What?" Silas stared into the flames, the light carving hard lines into his face. Because losing people is harder than never having them close. The words struck Clara deep. She wanted to reach across the table, to lay her hand over his, but she held back. Instead, she whispered, "Not everyone leaves, Silas." His gaze lifted, meeting hers. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to just the two of them. The flicker of firelight, the hush of night, and the weight of everything unsaid. But then he stood abruptly, retreating to the shadows. Clara remained by the fire, heart racing, knowing the walls around him were beginning to crack, and terrified of what it might mean if they finally fell. The following week tested them all. The riders returned, this time bolder, circling the outer fence as though daring Silas to challenge them. Clara stood on the porch with Maisie clutched close, watching Silas confront the men with rifle in hand. His voice was steady, carrying across the open land. "Ride on," he warned. "This place isn't yours to touch." For a tense moment, the outlaws lingered, their laughter sharp as spurs. Then, with a final jeer, they turned and vanished into the horizon. When Silas lowered the rifle, Clara rushed forward, her fear breaking into words before she could stop them. "You can't face them all alone. Don't shut me out anymore." His eyes searched hers, worn and weary. "Why do you care, Clara? You could have walked away a dozen times." She took his roughened hand, pressing it to her heart. "Because I've been searching for a place that feels like mine. And somehow, against all odds, I found it here, with you and Maisie." The silence between them was different now, filled with something fragile yet unshakable. Silas's defenses faltered, his shoulders easing for the first time in years. He pulled her close, and Clara felt the weight of his loneliness slip away. Behind them, Maisie grinned wide, clapping her small hands. "I knew it," she cheered. "Told you Daddy needed you." Laughter spilled from Clara's lips, warm and unrestrained, as Silas shook his head in quiet surrender. He looked at Clara with a tenderness he could no longer hide. "Then stay," he said simply. And in that moment, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the ranch lay bathed in gold, Clara knew she was no longer a guest, nor a stranger left behind at a train station. She was home,